Our keynote speaker for tonight really is a gentleman that's been described to me as an intellectual giant in the field of education technology, the Chief Technology and Information Officer of Houston Independent School District, Mr. Lenny Schad.
Thank you. So it's funny, you embarrassed me by saying intellectual giant. I was telling the table, I pulled up to valet my truck tonight, and I got out of it, and the valet comes up and gets my keys, and I said, do you hand me a ticket? And he said, oh no, I got you. And so I start to walk away, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, right? So I look back, and I was like, where is he? And so he's standing there, and I look to see if there's anybody else that's dressed like him, which there was. And so I was like, so how are you going to know? He said, your name is Mr. Schad, and we've got you. So I said, okay, so I'm walking in this building thinking, I'm never going to see my truck again. So if anybody is in Houston and they're going to be driving up 290, flag me down because I might be needing a ride home. So, all right, so big League School Remodel. That's what I was told to spend some time talking about. But really, when you talk about remodeling the school system, for me it breaks down to very simple things, and that is we have to get out of siloed thinking, and we need to get into systems thinking. And the speaker that was just up here, you were talking about how curriculum has to drive it, and we have to have all of these supports. It's exactly, it's perfect for what I'm going to talk about. We have to think as a system. And you no longer can have the curriculum plan and the technology plan and the professional development plan and the principal leadership plan and hope that at some point it crosses, because you're never going to see the results. So quickly about HISD, we're the 7th largest school district in the country. We have 284 schools. We have 215,000 students, speak over 100 languages, cover 330 square miles. We transport more kids in a day than the metro system in Houston. So we are a large system. The funny thing is, we are struggling with the same things of a district of 2,000. So our issues are the same. It's a matter of scope and scale. So really the size is irrelevant when you start talking about how are we going to change instruction and how are we going to prepare our kids for the future. Being the technology guy, I always want to start with technology, and from my perspective, we need to stop thinking about technology as a technology solution, and we need to start thinking of it as part of the classroom experience. There's a balancing act by that. We don't want technology to be the only thing. Kick off the video, please.
Emma. Emma. Emma.
I saw that when I can't even remember where I was. It was 2 or 3 years ago. And I thought that you can't say it any better, that there is a role for technology and then there's a role for just flat out writing on a piece of paper and talking to people. So there's the balancing act. So what I want to spend my time on today is talking about the system and what is transformation. And why is transformation important? And as a superintendent or a senior leader of your district, these are the things that you need to be thinking about before you ever walk down a path of saying, we want to change the things that we've always done. So qualities of transformational organizations. First, we have to understand that we need to embrace the change, and we need to understand that the change is personal. My wife is a teacher. She's a very good teacher. But if you were to walk into my wife, who has taught for a lot of years, and you were to walk into her and say, Christy, we like what you've done, but we want to change the way you're instructing. We want to change the way you teach people. First of all, if I were to say that, I'd get punched. But anybody else, she's going to look at you and say, what are you talking about? My kids are doing great. Why are you making me do this? The change is personal and it's emotional. It causes an immediate reaction, and it's all about how you propose what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it that is going to mean the difference between them embracing it and wanting to go along or fighting it. It's an evolution. When I started in HISD, I started in January of 2013. At the time, Dr. Terry Greer was the superintendent. My second day on the job, he said, Lenny, the reason I hired you is I want to do digital transformation. I want to be one-to-one in our high schools, and I want it ready to go by the time we start school in August. 8 months. 45 high schools, 60-some thousand devices. And I said, Dr. Greer, there's no way. That we could do that, and we will be another one of the big urban school systems that tried and failed. So what we did is we sat down and we said, there's more than handing the device out. Who all has to be at the table to have these conversations? We're 6 years in, and we're not done with our digital transformation. It took us 3 years to roll out to our high schools, but in that time we were preparing teachers. We were having conversations with the community. So this was way more than a device, but we understood that there's an evolution to it. The implementation pacing is critical, and what districts typically do, or when districts call me, the first thing I ask them is, why do you want to do it? And most of the time I get the response of, because we want to get technology in the hands of kids because we think that's 21st century and we want them to be prepared. It has nothing to do with why you want to do it. What you just described to me was how you're going to do it. What you need to think about is, why are you going to do that? And you've got to spend time on the why, because that's where you get your understanding. That's where you get your understanding from your teachers, from your students, from your principals, and from your community on why you're trying to do this. And after you have a sufficient amount of time understanding the why, now you can start to talk about how you want to do it. In HISD, our why is very simple. We want to produce global graduates, and we want graduates that are college ready. They're leaders, they're skilled communicators, they're responsible decision makers, they're critical thinkers, they're adaptive and productive. Notice, none of that says they can work a computer, right? This is our why. And when you go talk to parents and you go talk to principals and teachers, very few of them can argue with what our why is. So we spend time on the why, we spend time on the on the how. We've got to now create this culture, right? And when you talk about creating this culture, the blue line is status quo. And I think I'm being gracious and having an even angle up, right? So I'm giving a lot of people credit. The red line is digital transformation. And you're going to start off slow, and you're going to be working and working and working, and it's at that point where your digital transformation crosses over the status quo, where it hits the fan, right? And I will tell you, this is where most districts who have not committed to understanding what digital transformation and the culture of change is, where they have not spent the time defining the why, this is where projects die. This is where the initiatives die. Because it takes courage, because you're going to get calls from board members. You're going to get calls from parents. You're going to get calls from teachers and principals saying, this is awful. Right? How can you expect us to meet the state standards and have our kids pass, and you want us to do all this different type of instruction? But if you've spent the time on the why, and you've spent the time making sure there's the resources, the professional development, the growth that you see is exponential, right? It's exponential. So sustaining this culture, once you build this, you have it, you have the why, you have the how, you actually start doing it. It's a matter of sustaining this culture. One of the things that I don't think school systems do well at all is understand there is an organizational capacity that every school system has, and you have to embrace that and you have to understand that, right? Education as a whole, prior to 2013, I was in the private sector. I was in oil and gas. Change was just part of what we did, right? I mean, it was every month there was change. Education is very change averse, very change averse. And so you need to understand what your capacity as an organization is to take on new change. And it doesn't matter what Houston ISD is doing. It doesn't matter what Muleshoe, Texas ISD is doing. It has to, you got somebody from Muleshoe? No way! Oh! That, you know what? That is awesome, because I use you guys, I've used you 100 times. I've never had a clap in the back. I'm going to come meet you. I'm going to get my picture taken with you, because I'm going to say, see, whenever I say Muleshoe, everybody looks at me like, where did he make that up from? Muleshoe, we got it. All right. Now you broke my concentration. I'm flustered. So, all right, so organizational capacity is the key. And again, this has to be at the board level, at the superintendent level, to know what your climate is in your organization. And you can't force it. If you force it, the organization will push back, and they'll push back hard. And you don't get a second bite at this transformation apple. Talk to the districts that it's failed or they stopped their project. It's really hard to get anybody excited about kicking this up. You have to have an unwavering commitment, again, because you're going to have the battle. And you have to do it right the first time. And this is a matrix I love because for some reason we really struggle with this concept of consultants and engaging people from the outside. But there is absolutely a role for consultants, especially in digital transformation, especially in these initiatives in the curriculum area, in the professional development area, and especially in the technology area. So if I don't have time and I don't have experience, I've got to hire the hired gun. I got to go get the hired gun who knows exactly what they're doing. They're going to come in, and we basically turn them loose to get it in, to implement it. And there's nothing wrong with that. If I have a lot of experience but I have no time, I use the consultants to supplement my resources, right? So I'm backfilling, I'm doing things like this. If I have a lot of time and no experience, I'm bringing them in to do the cross-training, right? So my staff, they're doing the work, but now they're working side by side with a consultant. And if you have all the experience you need and you have all the time you need, I want to know who you are because I've never met that district. And I was waiting for it because the mule shoe dude, if you stood up, I was waiting for somebody to say, we've got that, we've got that. So, but this is a matrix that I think is really important for each of your areas to sit down and evaluate what is the current capability of my staff and where am I willing to bring in the expertise. Because there's one thing that I've seen since I've been in education, we love to reinvent the same wheel. We love it, and we love to make the same mistakes that first wheel did. It didn't improve on it. We're just going to make them again and again and again. So leverage the experts that are out there. Reach out to the people who have done it very well. Reach out to those consultants who have done it very well and engage their services. We sustain the culture of change. We do it right the first time. We slow down. Like I said, Dr. Greer, you know, what people told me before I went and worked for him, they said he wants to plant the grass in the morning. He wants to be mowing it in the afternoon. And that was exactly what he told me. I want to be one-to-one all across the high schools. We slowed down. Took us 3 years to make sure we had it at every one of our high schools. But you know what? We never once start and stop. We've never had to do that. So sometimes you've got to slow down. When I was in Katy ISD, one of the things when we were doing the digital transformation, we were given cell phones to fifth graders, mobile phones to fifth graders. We were the only district in the country that did that. Everybody said fifth graders can't do homework. We had fifth graders doing animation. We had them doing artwork. It was amazing to see what they were doing. But in that initiative, I focused my energy on that 20% that just sat in the room and had their arms crossed. And I spent my time, and I had my team spending time with them. When I came to HISD, I sat back and I realized that those 20%, they're exhausting. And they're demoralizing, and they drain your project team because they're excited. So when we started our initiative in Power Up in HISD, I could care less whether you wanted to be there or not. We focused on those people that were the middle of the road, right, that were on the fence, because those are the group of people that we had the most opportunity to influence. And the 20%, you know, it was either grow or go. Like, get on the bandwagon or not. We don't care. If you want to get on the bandwagon, we're going to do everything we can. But I spent no time with them. And it was amazing the number of people that initially sat in the meeting. You know, you've seen them with their arms crossed looking at you with the old mother look, you know. They came across. So stop focusing on them. Establish credibility and trust, and this has to be at the superintendent level. That superintendent has to be involved in your initiative, has to be one of your key communicators, has to be the one that's going and talking to principals about why this is important and it's not an option, and here's what I'm expecting to see when I walk on your campuses, and that filters all the way through, and it's a consistent message. Alignment, I think, is one of the most overused words that we have out there. Organizational alignment. We've got to be aligned. We've got to be aligned. Break it down. For me, when I saw this graph, this is organizational alignment. And this is what I see when I talk to districts, and it's to the point of the earlier speaker. We are all in the same boat. It doesn't matter whether as the CIO I stand up and say, you know what, our act is together. If curriculum isn't ready to leverage our learning object repository and all of our digital content, we are in the same boat. And until you start thinking about that, then organizational alignment, all I see is that it means divisional. My division is good, but I could care less what HR is doing. I could care less what finance is doing, all across the board. So organizational alignment is coming together to say we're in the same boat. Systems of strategic planning. So as you're now coming together and you're saying, all right, how are we going to start planning this out? You create the vision, but most importantly, you have to understand the current state. And when I have this conversation with people, they think that this applies just to technology. And it doesn't. I need to understand what the current state and capability is of the curriculum. Can we digitize it? What would we digitize? What are our contracts out there? What is our current state of our facilities? Right? Take the wires and the cables out and the wireless. What does the furniture look like? Is it conducive to do, a mobile learning environment? So all of these areas we have to do an assessment of to say, what is our current state? And it's at that point that you define your current state that now as a system, you can start talking realistically about what are we capable of doing. Because it doesn't matter how far ahead I get as a technology person if the rest of the business isn't leveraging it. Right? I'm spending a lot of money that might not ever be utilized for 3 years that I could have been spending to help curriculum get there. Right? But again, if I'm thinking in that silo, I'm going to stand up and go, woohoo, I've got wireless everywhere. Right? It doesn't matter if there's not anybody using it. Define the interdependencies. This again goes to that alignment conversation. We're all in the same boat. So what are our interdependencies? How am I interdependent on curriculum? How am I interdependent on principles and leadership? Speak with one voice. And I sit on the cabinet, and on our initiatives, we meet every other week, and we're in those meetings. And we are leading both strategically and tactically. And what I see too often is, depending on what your title is, you think all I am is strategy. I'm the vision, right? If this is truly a transformational initiative, you are going to have to get your hands dirty, because what you're doing is you are moving people's cheese, you're moving people's roles and responsibilities that they've been doing that for 23 years. That will not happen. You're going to be stepping on toes. And that will not happen leaving that up to just your managers and your principals. As executives, as senior leaders of your organization, you have to be in the room saying, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is in the best interest of the project. And you have to get tactical. You can't just sit up and say, I'm strategic. So when you think of who is the system, this is the graph when everybody asks about HISD and why we were successful in doing what we were doing. This is the graph. This is our system. At the center of it is school support, which means principals. We have curriculum, we have technology, we have instructional technology, we have education technology, professional development, communication. This working group started in March of 2013, and it is still in existence, meeting every 2 weeks in HISD. Because that is our system now. It sits up on top facilities, because we're in the process of building new schools. So if this group isn't communicating to the new school design, then we're missing a great opportunity to be building our high schools that are conducive for every student having a device. So we're talking about mobile furniture and open spaces. And then you have to be working with HR, and you have to be working with the finance team to make sure, as we're thinking about hiring whoever, that they have this understanding of what our transformational view is and what their role is. So what are we expecting for a high school teacher now? Right? We don't buy textbooks in the high school anymore except for a very few courses. We are digital 100% at the high school. So that's a big change for teachers. It's a big change for students. So we're working with HR on that. As we're building the vision, one of the things that has to happen, which is why you see my foundation down there of finance, is you have to start talking about what are you going to stop doing, right? And because you're going to have that teacher who is going to stand up and say, oh my God, you took sticky bear math away, and my kids are not going to be able to learn math, right? And Okay, that's not one I made up either. That's not, there is sticky bear math out there. So, but every dollar has an advocate, right? And so one of the things that we spent a lot of time on as a cabinet was having conversations around what are we going to stop doing? And I will tell you, the first year that we did this in HISD, what we were able to stop and abandon funded the first year of devices in our district, right? You will be amazed at the applications and the software that your districts are paying for, that when you sit down and really have that hard conversation about, is it in alignment with our digital strategy now? How many of those will go away? How many professional developments will go away, right? Who's coming in and what are they doing? So that first year we spent a lot of time, and those are not easy conversations. As I said, every dollar has an advocate. And they're very quick to reach to board members and to everybody else. But again, if you spent the time on the why, this is an easy reference back to this is alignment of what our vision is and how we're going to support it. So you have PD, you have software, you have content, and then you have to have the conversation of repurposing dollars, repurposing people, right? So we sat down and we said, you know, I understand you've been doing this role for 20 years and you've been really good at it, but in our new vision for what we want to have occur in the district, there's really not that role doesn't exist. But guess what? This role does. And we're really excited about it and we want to move you there. And if you want to, we're here to help. If you don't, hasta la vista, right? We don't have time to wait. So you repurpose dollars, you repurpose staff, and you repurpose time. Where are we spending our time and energy on? Once we get that done, here is the vision. This is Power Up in HISD. This is the brand. Coming from the private sector, branding big initiatives was something very common to me, very foreign in school systems. You have to create a brand. You're marketing this. This isn't about communication. If you're turning the world upside down, you got to get out and you got to beat the drums. You got to be able to say Power Up. In the city of Houston proper, when you talk about Power Up, most people are going to know what it is. It's our one-to-one initiative for our high school students. And if you'll notice, it's a three-legged milk stool. It's about the technology. It's about the hub, which is our learning management system, our learning object repository, where our teachers are planning, where our students are going in and getting the lessons, where they're doing their homework. And then it's our digital resources, about where our kids are going and how we're creating their pathways. That is Power Up. That's our brand. That's our how. We said why we want to do it. We want to create global graduates. This is how we're creating global graduates. So now I want to shift gears quickly and talk about strategy. And this is a graph that we see all the time, but this has been something that has really been a focal point for us. At the center of this is data, right? Because a lot of your decisions that I just walked through is going to be based on your data. And if you're willing to spend time in your data is going to tell you where you're spending money on software. Is that software producing the results you want? And is it producing the results for all of your students, if you have an enterprise license? Or is it producing results for just a small particular demographic? So you got to understand the data, the people, the process, and the technology. So I'll start with the technology. As I said, I started in 2013, and you can see there have been 4 major initiatives that we took on, going back to the pacing, the scope, and the scale. First one was Power Up. That's where we started having the conversation about giving a device out to our kids. Second year, Power Up Hub. This is where we start to bring in our learning object repository, our learning management system. This is where we started getting the content converted, where we started having conversations with all the publishers. And you know, being a large school system, we have a lot of push in the vendor community. And we were able to say to the big vendors, to the big content providers, you are either going to provide this in the format that we want, you know, aligning to IMS global standards. We're a big IMS global shop. Believe in them a lot. We think it makes our job a lot easier. And as a vendor, you're gonna buy into this, or we're not gonna buy your product. And I think that there was a lot of, yeah, sure, until they realized that we were serious. And in that 2014, 2015 year, we got our learning management provider, we got the publishers and ourselves in a room, and we went to work. And I will tell you, it was not an easy year. It was not an easy year at all, but we made a lot of progress. And so, you know, it's a matter of, again, what I talked about, finding out who's doing this. If you're interested in digital content, us, Orange County, there's a number of districts out there that have moved very far along this digital content integration. Reach out to them, because I don't want you to make the same mistakes that we made as we were learning how to do this. Then we did OneSource. We replaced our entire finance system, HR, payroll, plant management. We implemented SAP, and now we are in the process of implementing a new student information system. So this has been our 5 years, but if you notice, it was paced out. It was very strategic. We sat down and we said, what are the things that we need to do into this district to support it, and when do we want to be able to do it? So this isn't hodgepodge. This was laid out back in 2013. Here's when we want to do it. Here's how we're going to get the money allocated, and here's how we're going to go. On the people side, I don't want to brush over this. So when I talk to people in education and I ask them, are you doing organizational change management? Every one of them says, absolutely. Let me tell you about our training. Right? That is not organizational change management. Organizational change management is the emotional side. So this graph, if you look at what project management is, it's the process of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, closing, the tools you use as a statement of work, project charter, project plan, milestone review. That's project management. Organizational change management focuses on the people side of moving from current state to future state. It's the emotional side of this. So you're talking about preparing for change, managing change, reinforcing change. You're talking about individual change management. You're talking about communication. This is, to me, one of the most critical elements anybody needs to be doing if they're talking about an enterprise implementation. Because here's what happens. You're in the middle of starting to do your training, or you're starting to do your rollout, and you hear, man, this teacher group is on fire. And then at another campus, you hear, man, this principal group is on fire. And what we typically do, if you have not embraced organizational change management, is you say, well, they just need more training. And so what we've done is we have assumed that both of these groups are struggling with the exact same issue, and that training is going to fix that. However, if they are struggling with leadership, it was a failure to launch. If they're struggling with skills, they have confusion about what they're going to do. If they're struggling with resources, this thing just walks you down the path. And it's something that we surveyed out. We survey our user groups, we survey our power user groups, and what we have found is these different groups are all struggling with the different element of this. So what it's allowed us to do is target what we're trying to do to get that group to feel better. And it isn't always training, right? So if the leadership is missing, then what we have to do is go back and figure out what do we need to do to spend more time on the why. Right? Because they just haven't launched it. Or if the skills are missing, they're having the anxiety. How do we ease the anxiety? But each of these groups are suffering from a different issue. And what this does is it allows us to really become targeted. This has been a game changer in our SAP implementation, and it was a game changer as we start to approach our student information system. The other side of this is the change management system that we use. They follow an ADKAR, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so each one of these systems is a way that we measure it. So if you look at Sigma 6 and all of the project management things, there is a tight correlation. So the Lean Six Sigma methodology says we're going to define it. The equivalent is that in organizational change management, it's an awareness. Are we making them aware? We're going to measure on the organizational change management side is, do they have the desire to change? That's what we need to be thinking about. Analyze, we're going to make sure that they have the knowledge. We're going to make sure that there is the training. We want them to improve. What is their ability to do their job? So now we've given them the knowledge, what is their ability? And control, how do we reinforce it? So there is a direct correlation between very traditional project management, but the organizational change management takes into account that emotional side. And all of us have been in the trainings where we walk in and sit down, and for the first 20 minutes, it's the yeah, but session, right? Yeah, but I don't do it that way. Yeah, but that can't work. Right? So the first half of this session is getting people to go through the why and the acceptance, and then we get them into, here's how we want to train you. But you've lost a huge training opportunity, because then everybody else in the room is thinking, wow, what am I missing? Because I wasn't that upset coming here, right? But these people over here are losing their mind. So organizational change management really streamlines everything. From a process perspective, measuring has to be a specific, attainable, and time-dependent, and depending on who your audience is, it needs to be different. And too often we create a set of metrics that we think is going to be relevant to everybody across the board, and it's not. One size does not fit all. When you look at defining the scale and time, I told you it was an evolution. You're going to start out hoping that you get some literacy behind it. You then move to where they're adapting and they're consuming. And actually our goal is where we transform and we produce. You know, HISD, Rosa is in the audience. Where's Rosa? Rosa, so we have some high schools that are getting close to adapting, where they're consuming, right? 6 years in now. 6 years in. We have a lot of campuses who are still at that literacy stage. I don't know that we have anybody that's between adapting and transforming. Do you? What do you think? Okay, well that's good news. Thank you. You're kind of like my mule shoe guy out there, right? All right. My point here is we're 6 years in. We've got 45 high schools, and this is where we're at. And we're okay. We're still working with those principals. We're helping them understand what this looks like. You know, every time you have a principal turnover, you've got to be prepared for that. We had one in our second year. We had a high school. The principal was setting the world on fire. His campus, you could walk in. Their teachers were doing amazing things. That principal left that semester at the winter break. And by the time school started the next year, they were one of our worst high schools for adopting it. And it shouldn't surprise anybody in the room. The principal is the person on the campus. The principal is the one that drives this, that says we're going to have ownership, just like the superintendent does for the district. That principal is the one that controls it. One of the things you've got to think through is a maturity matrix where you are actually looking at and able to measure where your campuses are. Early on in our implementation, I was sitting in a cabinet meeting and the superintendent said, I'm going to name 3 high schools and I want to know how they're doing. And he named the first one and he said, curriculum, how are they doing? They're doing great. The principal leadership, how are they doing? They're doing awful. They're doing awful. Looked at me and he said, Lenny, how are they doing? And I said, they're kind of in between. So now think about, and these are senior level leaders in our district, and now you're this principal that a senior person comes out to you and goes, you're knocking it out of the park. Then tomorrow, the person comes in and goes, man, you got a lot of work to do. And then that third person comes in the third day and says, you're kind of good. What do you do? Right? I'll tell you, if I was that principal, I'd be like, y'all stay away because you're nuts. Like, get on the same page. Right? So what we ended up doing is working to define a matrix that by campus, by teacher, a principal can put out there and say, here's where we're at on the maturity matrix. And here's where I think my campus is. And I'm going to take you to a teacher who is knocking it out of the park. And we think they're at this level. And then I'm going to take you down to a teacher who's a new teacher who's struggling with this. So it takes the individual ambiguity out of it. And now you're, again, evaluating and reviewing and supporting as a system. Policies, responsible use guidelines, student code of conduct, enrollment forms, discipline management, and usage restrictions. These are the things that early on we learned as we were going. Discipline management was a huge thing because principals don't know how to discipline in this new environment, right? And what we were ending up with is, you know, this principal handled a situation this way, the same situation on another campus, they handled it a different way, and it's amazing. In the city of Houston, you could be across town, those parents somehow find, it's kind of like the mule shoe guy. They were probably in a meeting, and they found each other, and they were like, holy cow, that happened to your kid? Well, nothing happened to mine. So we started to get this inconsistency really bubbling up. So spending time to make sure that your kids understand that. The data, this is the data. And I talked about IMS Global and interoperability. This is what drives our system now. And it's very complex, but what I'm going to tell you is it is making sure that the vendors and the data that we are bringing in are integrating to our ecosystem. I am not integrating to yours. Because if I have to integrate to every ecosystem out there, I'm missing my opportunity. So this is our ecosystem, and you're going to play in our data ecosystem. So we have it all feeding together. We're able to go in and look at performance of kids, software used. We're beginning to start looking at that. And again, this is a work in motion. We have dashboards for our principals, for our teachers, for our board members, where they can see where their students are migrating to, how they're performing, how they're progressing. But data is what drives it all. And my only advice to you is, if you don't have a data ecosystem out there, these are conversations you need to start having right away, right? Because that is going to be the foundation from which you start to build all of your decisions. And once you get an ecosystem defined, put the hard line down that says, this is our ecosystem, come play in it. And if you can't come play in it, then you need to go talk to places that can help you do this integration. But you're not coming in unless you play nice with us. Are we there yet? You know, 6 years in, I would say we have made tremendous progress. And we have data to show where our students are improving. We have not had pushback. We haven't had parents at meetings, you know, saying the devices are horrible or the instruction is horrible. I think we have campuses where you can go on and you can see it's part of the culture now, right? It is part of the culture. You can see principals that are new principals that we are spending time with, and they are instituting that culture. I have an individual, I call it's Rosa, she's right out at the table here. She is a former principal. She's been through all of that side of the education piece. She works, believe it or not, in technology, and her whole job is to go to these campuses and meet with these principals and meet with these assistant principals and talk about your system. Where is your system breaking down, and how can we help you improve your system? From curriculum to technology to professional development. She can go have those conversations because she's been in the trenches with them, right? And it's so important that I have that kind of representation in my department, because we can't do it by ourselves. So when she's out on a campus talking to these principals, they're listening. And our statistics are amazing. You know, I mean, we have areas where you know, the gangs, there's a gang that kicks up and we'll lose 50 laptops in a week, right? Because, and you find them out on eBay where they're selling the parts. You know, you have somebody in the neighborhood saying, I'll give you $25 for them. And so that's not uncommon. But what's amazing is when we have somebody like a Rosa who's working with those principals on the systems, those loss numbers are really starting to go down. We're doing more frequent laptop checks and different things like that. So every district will have its nuances of challenges. Our instructional tech, our ed tech group, they're responsible for all of our data interoperability. They're continually working with the publishers. We're working on cyber awareness. You know, we can't solve that problem as technology. We solve that problem by making our community aware of what's out there. So they're very focused on doing that. So again, it's a very collaborative, very focused, aligned initiative. We're working with our technology team. We're working with our curriculum team. Our superintendent has bought into it. We're now on our third. So it was Terry, an interim, Richard Carranza, and now an interim. So we're on our fourth in about 3 years. This project has never come up to say we need to kill it. And we're in recapture, which means every year we send millions back to the state, to the point where we're laying teachers off and we're, you know, cutting programs. This initiative has never been on the chopping table, not from the board perspective. And so what that tells you is that this has become the culture of HISD, that we're unwilling, no matter how tight the financial situation is. I better knock on wood, because we're starting on the budget process now. But you know, that says a lot when you go through those kind of situations, that it wasn't even a topic for cutting. And with that, I am done. Thank you so much. I appreciate your attention fighting over dessert. So thank you.